They say silence is golden, but sometimes it's pure strategy. I learned that 5 years ago at what should have been a simple family dinner. What happened that night changed everything, and I'm finally ready to tell you the whole story. My name is Alex, and I've always been the quiet one in my family. The one who listened more than spoke, who observed more than participated. Growing up, I watched my siblings command every room they entered while I preferred the shadows. Maybe that's why nobody saw it coming. Let me start at the beginning because you need to understand the foundation that cracked that night. I met Jordan 3 years before the dinner. We were both working late at a coffee shop downtown, laptops glowing in the dim light. When the barista announced closing time, Jordan looked up from their screen with tired eyes and said, "I guess even caffeine has its limits." Something about that moment, that shared exhaustion, that gentle humor in the face of another endless day, made me look up from my own work for the first time in months. We started talking, really talking, not the surface level conversations I'd grown accustomed to with my family, but deep, meaningful exchanges about dreams, fears, about what we wanted from life. Jordan was an artist passionate about sculpture, with hands that could shape clay into emotions I couldn't even name. They had this way of seeing beauty in broken things, of finding art in the discarded and forgotten. I fell in love slowly then. All at once, Jordan brought color into my black and white world. They made me laugh at my own seriousness, encouraged me to take risks I'd never considered. For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen. But my family was different. You see, I come from what people call old money. My great grandfather built a manufacturing empire that my grandfather expanded and my father inherited. By the time I came along, the business was a multi generational legacy with trusts and investments spread across dozens of accounts. My siblings never paid much attention to the financial details. They were too busy enjoying the lifestyle it provided. But I was different. I studied business, understood the books, knew where every dollar came from and where it went. When my father had his first heart attack 5 years ago, he quietly transferred primary control of the family finances to me. Not because I was the oldest, I'm actually the youngest of four, but because I was the only one who understood the complexity of what we owned. My siblings were listed as beneficiaries, had access to their trust funds, but the main accounts, the business decisions, the real power that all flowed through me, I never told them. Why would I? They never asked about money, they just expected it to be there, and it always was. For 2 years, Jordan and I built something beautiful together. We traveled, we dreamed, we talked about the future. Jordan's art began to reflect our happiness, sculptures that seemed to dance with joy, pieces that galleries started to notice. They were getting recognition, building a career, becoming the artist they'd always dreamed of being. I knew it was time to introduce them to my family. The dinner was planned for a Sunday in October. My mother still insisted on these formal family gatherings, even though we'd all long since moved out. The dining room in my parents' house could seat 12, with its mahogany table and crystal chandelier, oil paintings of long-dead ancestors. Watching from the walls, it was intimidating even to me, and I'd grown up there. I'd told my family about Jordan, of course, but I'd kept the details vague. Maybe I was protecting them, maybe I was protecting myself. I just said I was bringing someone special, someone important to me. Jordan was nervous that morning. They changed clothes 3 times, asking me what my family would think of this outfit or that one. I assured them it didn't matter, that my family would love them because I loved them. I believed that. I actually believed that. We arrived at 6, just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded me of Jordan's latest sculpture. My mother answered the door with her practiced smile, the one she wore for charity, galas and business dinners. She hugged me warmly, then turned to Jordan with that same smile, though I noticed it didn't quite reach her eyes. "You must be Jordan," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she was being polite but not welcoming. "Alex has told us so much about you." That was the first lie. I'd barely told them anything. We entered the dining room. where my father, my three siblings, and their respective partners were already seated. The conversation was the usual family fare, discussions of business, gossip about people they knew, plans for upcoming social events. Jordan tried to participate, sharing stories about their art, their recent gallery showing, their dreams of opening a studio. My sister Emma made polite noises, but I could see her exchanging glances with my brother Marcus, my eldest brother David. Barely looked up from his phone. Their partners, people my family had known for years, fit seamlessly into the conversation in a way that highlighted how Jordan stood out. But Jordan was trying so hard. They complimented my mother's cooking, asked thoughtful questions about my father's business, showed genuine interest in my siblings' lives. They were being themselves, warm and curious and kind, and I felt a surge of love watching them navigate this challenging room with such grace. Then came the moment that changed everything. We were between the main course and dessert when my father stood up. He had this way of commanding attention without raising his voice, a skill he'd perfected over decades of running board meetings. The room went quiet. "I want to say something," he began, his voice measured and formal. "Alex, we appreciate you bringing your friend to dinner." Friend, the word hit me like a physical blow. Not partner, not significant other, friend. "But I think it's important to be clear about our family values," he continued. "We've always been a traditional family, and we expect our children to make choices that reflect those values." The room was dead silent now. Jordan's hand, which had been resting on the table near mine, slowly withdrew. I could feel the tension radiating from them, could almost hear their heart beating faster. "What exactly are you saying, Dad?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked directly at Jordan, not at me. "I'm saying that while we appreciate your friend's artistic talents, we don't feel comfortable having them as a regular presence at our family gatherings. This is a family table, and we need to maintain certain standards." The words hung in the air like poison. I watched Jordan's face crumble, watched them try to compose themselves even as their hands started to shake. My mother was staring at her plate. My siblings suddenly found their wine glasses fascinating. "Alex," my father continued, "we love you, but we can't support this lifestyle choice. We've discussed it as a family, and we're all in agreement, all in agreement." They'd discussed it. They'd made a decision about my life, about Jordan, about us, without even giving Jordan a chance. I looked around the table at these people I'd called family. Emma, who I'd helped through her divorce, who'd cried on my shoulder when her husband cheated. Marcus, whose gambling debts I'd quietly paid off twice. David, whose business startup I'd funded when no bank would give him a loan. My mother, who'd never worked a day in her life but somehow always had money for her charities and shopping trips. They were all looking at me expectantly, waiting for me to accept their judgment, to apologize, to promise to make better choices. They expected me to choose them over Jordan, to prioritize their comfort over my happiness. Instead, I did something they never expected. I stayed silent. I reached over and took Jordan's hand. It was trembling, but they didn't pull away. I squeezed gently, trying to communicate everything I couldn't say in that moment. Then I stood up. "We're leaving," I said quietly. "Alex, don't be dramatic," my mother said, her voice sharp with irritation. "Sit down. We can discuss this like adults." But I was already helping Jordan up, was already walking toward the door. I didn't yell, didn't argue, didn't defend myself or Jordan or our relationship. I just left. Jordan was crying by the time we reached the car, silent tears that broke my heart into pieces. They'd been so excited about tonight, so hopeful about being accepted, about becoming part of my family. And my family had shattered that hope with calculated cruelty. "I'm sorry," I whispered as we sat in the car. "I'm so sorry." "It's not your fault," Jordan said, but their voice was hollow. "I should have expected this. I should have been prepared, but they shouldn't have had to be prepared. They shouldn't have had to armor themselves against the people who were supposed to love me, who were supposed to welcome the person who made me happy." I drove us home in silence, my mind racing. I'd always known my family was conservative, but I'd thought their love for me would be stronger than their prejudices. I'd been naive, and my naivety had cost Jordan their dignity. That night, I held Jordan while they cried. I made promises I wasn't sure I could keep. I swore that I would choose them over my family, that I would build a life with them regardless of what my parents thought. But I could see the doubt in their eyes, could feel them pulling away even as they lay in my arms. The next morning, I woke up to silence. Jordan was gone. Not just out for coffee or a walk, gone. Their clothes were missing from the closet, their art supplies cleared from the studio we'd set up in the spare room. They'd left a note on the kitchen counter, written in their careful artist's handwriting: Alex, I love you more than I've ever loved anyone, but I can't be the reason you lose your family. I saw how much it hurt you to leave that dinner, and I know you'll always wonder if you made the right choice. I won't be the person who asks you to choose between your family and your happiness. Maybe someday, when things are different, we can try again. But right now, I need to let you go. Take care of yourself. I read that note 50 times that first day. I called Jordan's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I drove to their old apartment, but the landlord said they'd moved out that morning. I contacted their friends, but no one would tell me where they'd gone. Jordan had vanished from my life as completely as they'd entered it. My family expected me to come crawling back. My mother called the next day, her voice syrupy with false concern. Alex, honey, I know you're upset, but you'll see that we were right. You'll find someone more suitable, someone who fits with our family. I hung up on her. Marcus called a few days later. Look, I get that you're mad, but you're taking this too seriously. It was just dinner. You're still family. I hung up on him. Two, one by one, they all reached out, expecting me to apologize, to admit they were right, to fall back into the role of the quiet, compliant youngest child who never caused trouble. But I didn't. I stayed silent, and while I stayed silent, I did something else, something none of them expected because none of them had ever paid attention to who actually controlled the money. I started making changes. It began small. I moved the family business accounts to different banks, ones that required my authorization for all transactions. I updated the trust fund access protocols, adding new verification requirements. I restructured the investment portfolios, consolidating control under my name only. My siblings' monthly allowances started arriving a day late, then 2 days late. Their credit cards began getting declined for unusual purchases. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would cause immediate panic, but enough to create inconvenience. When they called the banks, they were told that account security measures had been updated and they needed to speak with the primary account holder. That was me, but I wasn't taking their calls. Marcus was the first to really notice. His gambling habit meant he went through money faster than the others, and when his trust fund payment was delayed by a week, he started to panic. He showed up at my apartment, pounding on the door. Alex, open up. I know you're in there. I sat on my couch, reading a book, listening to him yell. Eventually, he gave up and left. Emma was next. Her daughter's private school tuition check bounced, and suddenly she was faced with the humiliating reality that she couldn't afford her child's education without the family money. She called me crying, begging me to fix whatever technical problem was preventing her from accessing her account. I let her calls go to voicemail. David's startup began to fail when his investors pulled out after discovering that his primary financial backing was unstable. He'd been using the promise of family money to secure business deals, but when those funds became inaccessible, his entire business model collapsed. He sent me angry texts, then pleading emails, then finally showed up at my office. Security escorted him out. My parents' situation was more complex. They had their own accounts, their own resources, but their lifestyle was built on the assumption that the family wealth would always be there. When their country club membership couldn't be renewed because the automatic payment failed, when their charity donations were returned for insufficient funds, when their financial advisor couldn't reach me to discuss their portfolio, they began to realize that something had fundamentally changed. For months, they tried to reach me through intermediaries. Old family friends would call, asking if I was okay, if there was anything they could do to help resolve whatever misunderstanding had occurred. I was polite but distant, declining invitations, avoiding social events where I might encounter my family. I threw myself into work, expanding the business, making new investments, building the empire my great grandfather had started. I was good at it, better than my father had ever been. Without the need to consult with family members who didn't understand the business, I could move quickly, make decisions that doubled our profits. I also started quietly giving money to LGBTQ plus organizations, youth shelters, art programs for underprivileged kids. I funded scholarships for students who'd been rejected by their families, sponsored gallery shows for emerging artists who reminded me of Jordan, but none of it filled the hole that Jordan's absence had left in my life. I hired private investigators to find them, but Jordan had been thorough in their disappearance. They'd closed their social media accounts, stopped showing their art under their real name, seemingly vanished from the art world entirely. It was like they'd never existed. Months turned into years. My family's situation grew more desperate. Without access to the family money, they were forced to confront the reality of their own financial limitations. Marcus lost his house, had to move in with Emma. Emma's husband left her, couldn't handle the stress of their reduced circumstances. David's business went bankrupt, and he had to take a job working for someone else for the first time in his life. My parents sold their house, moved to a smaller place, let go of their household staff. My mother's charities stopped receiving her donations, and she was quietly removed from several boards. My father's health declined, the stress of their financial situation triggering another heart attack. I watched it all from a distance, my heart breaking even as I maintained my resolve. These were people I'd loved, people who'd raised me, who'd given me opportunities and advantages, but they were also people who'd rejected the most important person in my life without a second thought. The breaking point came during my fourth year of silence. I was at a gallery opening, one of the few social events I still attended, when I saw a piece that made me stop breathing. It was a sculpture, abstract but somehow familiar, capturing an emotion I recognized but couldn't name. The artist's name was listed as J. Rivers, but I knew those hands, knew the way they worked clay into feeling. Jordan was alive. Jordan was still creating. I bought the piece without haggling, paid triple the asking price, and asked the gallery owner for the artist's contact information. They refused, citing privacy policies, but I could see the recognition in their eyes when I introduced myself. They knew who I was, and they knew who Jay Rivers was. I left my contact information with the gallery owner, along with a letter for Jordan. I told them about the years of silence, about the family's financial struggles, about how I'd never stopped loving them or looking for them. I explained that I'd chosen them over my family that night, that I'd never wavered in that choice, even when it meant losing everything else. 2 weeks later, Jordan called. Their voice was different, more guarded, but still the same person who'd made me laugh in that coffee shop. They'd been living in a small town 3 states away, teaching art to kids and adults, building a quiet life away from the art world they'd once hoped to conquer. I saw the news, they said, about your family's situation. I know what you did. I don't know what you mean, I replied, but we both knew that was a lie. Alex, I never wanted you to destroy your family for me. I didn't destroy them, I said quietly. I just stopped supporting them. There's a difference. We talked for hours that first call, and then 4 days. Jordan told me about their life in hiding, about the art they'd been creating, about the students they'd been teaching. They'd found peace, they said, but they'd never found happiness, not the kind we'd had together. I told them about the business, about the scholarships, about the nights I'd spent staring at the sculpture they'd left behind, the only piece of their art I'd managed to keep. I want to see you, I finally said. I don't know if that's a good idea, Jordan replied, but I could hear the longing in their voice. Then let me come to you, no pressure, no expectations, just let me see you. They gave me their address. I drove 12 hours to reach the small town where Jordan had been living. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where strangers were noticed and commented upon. Jordan was waiting for me at a small cafe downtown, looking older but somehow more settled, like they'd grown into themselves in a way they hadn't before. We talked until the cafe closed, then walked through the quiet streets under stars that seemed brighter than they'd ever been in the city. Jordan told me about their students, about the sculptures they'd been creating, about the peace they'd found in simplicity. I've been thinking about what you said, they told me as we sat on a bench in the town square, about not supporting your family versus destroying them, and I think you're right, but I also think it's time to make a choice about what comes next. I looked at them in the moonlight, this person who'd been the center of my world, who I'd lost and found again. What do you mean? I mean, are you going to stay angry forever? Are you going to punish them for the rest of their lives? Or are you going to decide what kind of person you want to be? It wasn't the conversation I'd expected to have. I'd imagined apologies, reconciliation, maybe even some declaration of love. Instead, Jordan was challenging me to think beyond my hurt, beyond my need for justice. They hurt you, I said. They hurt us. Yes, they did, and you hurt them back. You've had your revenge, Alex. The question is, what now? I spent 3 days in that small town, walking with Jordan, meeting their students, seeing the life they'd built without me. It was a good life, meaningful and full of purpose, but I could see the loneliness in their eyes, the careful way they kept their distance even as we rediscovered our connection. On my last night there, as we sat in Jordan's small studio surrounded by sculptures that told the story of their years, away from me, they asked the question I'd been dreading. If you could go back to that dinner, knowing what you know now, would you do anything differently? I thought about it seriously, imagining myself 5 years younger, sitting at that mahogany table with Jordan's hand in mine. I would have spoken up, I said finally. I would have defended you. I would have made it clear that anyone who couldn't accept you couldn't have me. And then I would have left with you and we would have built a life together without them. Jordan smiled sadly. But you didn't. You stayed silent and then you punished them for years. You became someone I didn't recognize. The words stung because they were true. In my quest for justice, I'd become cold, calculating, vengeful. I'd turned my love for Jordan into a weapon against my family, and in doing so, I'd lost both. So, what do I do now? I asked. You decide who you want to be, Jordan said simply. You decide what kind of life you want to live, and then you start living it. I drove home the next day with Jordan's words echoing in my mind. I'd spent 5 years frozen in that moment of humiliation and hurt, defining myself by my family's rejection and my response to it. But Jordan was right. I had to decide what came next. The first thing I did was call my father. He answered on the first ring, his voice hopeful and desperate. Alex, is that you? Yes, Dad, it's me. Oh, thank God. We've been so worried. We've been trying to reach you for years. Whatever's wrong, we can fix it. We can work it out. I know what's wrong, Dad. The question is whether you know. There was a long pause. I think I do. The dinner. What we said to your friend, Alex, we were wrong. We were so wrong, and we're sorry. Jordan isn't my friend, Dad. Jordan is the person I love, the person I wanted to marry, the person you humiliated and rejected without even giving them a chance. I know that now. Alex, please, can we talk? In person. Your mother, she hasn't been the same since you cut us off. None of us have. I agreed to meet them, not at the family house, but at a neutral location, a restaurant downtown. I chose a place that was public but quiet, somewhere we could talk without being overheard. They were all there when I arrived. My parents, my siblings, even their partners. They looked older, worn down by years of financial stress and family conflict. My mother had been crying, I could tell. My father's hands shook slightly as he stood to greet me. Alex, my mother said, her voice breaking. You look good. You look successful. I am successful, I said, taking a seat across from them. The business is doing better than it ever has. I've expanded into new markets, increased profits by 400%. Great-grandfather would be proud. We're proud too, my father said quickly. We always knew you had a head for business. That's why we trusted you with the accounts. No, I said calmly. You gave me control because you couldn't be bothered to learn how the money worked. You were happy to spend it without understanding where it came from or how it was managed. And when I needed your support, when I brought the person I loved to meet you, you chose your prejudices over your family. Emma started to cry. Marcus stared at his hands. David looked angry but stayed silent. We were wrong, my mother said. We were so wrong, and we're sorry. We've had years to think about it, to see how much damage we caused. We drove away the child we were supposed to protect. You didn't drive me away, I said. You drove away Jordan. I chose to leave. Jordan, my father said carefully. Are you still in touch with them? Recently, yes. Are you planning to get back together? I looked around the table at these people who'd shaped my life, who'd given me opportunities and advantages, who'd also hurt me more deeply than I'd ever thought possible. I don't know, I said honestly. Jordan and I are talking again, but we're not the same people we were 5 years ago. I became someone harder, someone more ruthless, someone who could cut off his own family for years without blinking. Jordan became someone more careful, someone who learned to live without the love they'd hoped to find. Alex, Emma said through her tears, we know you're angry. We know you have every right to be angry, but we're family. We're supposed to forgive each other, supposed to work through these things, are we? I asked, because 5 years ago you all decided that Jordan wasn't family. You decided that your comfort was more important than my happiness. You made a choice about what kind of family we were going to be, and you made a choice about what kind of person you were going to be, David said, his voice hard. You destroyed our lives, Alex. You took everything away from us. Marcus lost his house. Emma's marriage fell apart. I had to start over from nothing. Mom and Dad lost their home. Was that really justice? Was that really fair? I looked at him steadily. Was it fair to ambush Jordan at a family dinner? Was it fair to make that decision about my life without even asking me what I wanted? Was it fair to expect me to choose between the person I loved and the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally? The table fell silent. I'm not proud of what I did, I said finally. Jordan helped me understand that revenge isn't the same as justice, but I'm also not sorry that I chose them over you. I'm sorry that I had to choose it all. What do you want from us? My mother asked, what do we need to do to make this right? I pulled out my phone and showed them a picture. It was Jordan, laughing at something one of their students had said, surrounded by clay sculptures and paintbrushes, looking genuinely happy. I want you to see who you rejected, I said. I want you to understand that Jordan isn't some abstract concept or lifestyle choice. They're a real person with real feelings, someone who makes beautiful art and teaches kids and volunteers at animal shelters. Someone who loved me enough to walk away rather than force me to choose between them and you. They stared at the picture. My mother's crying intensified. I want you to understand that when you rejected Jordan, you were rejecting the best part of me, I continued. You were rejecting the person who made me laugh, who encouraged me to take risks, who saw potential in me that I didn't even know existed. We see that now, my father said quietly. We see what we lost. Do you? Do you? Really? Because it's not just about saying you're sorry, it's about proving that you mean it. It's about showing that you're willing to be better than you were. How? Emma asked. How do we prove that? I thought about Jordan's words, about the choice I had to make about who I wanted to be. You start by understanding that this isn't about punishment anymore, I said. It's about rebuilding. It's about creating a family that's worthy of the name. Over the next hour, I laid out my terms, not demands, but expectations. I wanted them to educate themselves about LGBTQ plus issues, to volunteer with organizations that supported rejected youth, to make amends not just with me but with the community they'd shown prejudice against. I also wanted them to earn back their financial stability, not just have it handed to them. I would restore partial access to their accounts, but they would need to prove they could manage money responsibly, contribute to the family business, make meaningful changes to their lives, and Jordan? My mother asked. If Jordan and I rebuild our relationship, if we decide to try again, then they become part of this family. Not a tolerated guest, not someone you put up with for my sake, but a full member of this family, someone you celebrate, someone you support, someone you love because I love them. They agreed, not easily, not without questions and negotiations. But they agreed. That night I called Jordan. How did it go? They asked. Better than I expected, but we have a long way to go. And us? Do we have a long way to go too? I smiled, hearing the hope in their voice. We have as long as we need, but Jordan, I want you to know something. I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago, and I'm not the same person I was 5 years before that. I'm someone who's learned to stand up for what matters, someone who's learned that love is something you fight for, not something you hope other people will accept. And what if I'm not the same person either? Then we'll figure out who we are. Now together, but only if you want to. I want to, Jordan said softly. I've wanted to for 5 years. That was 6 months ago. Jordan moved back to the city, not in with me immediately, but close enough that we could see each other regularly. We're taking it slow, rebuilding trust, rediscovering the connection we'd lost. My family is keeping their promises. Marcus got a job and an apartment, is attending Gamblers Anonymous. Emma is in therapy, working on understanding her role in the family dysfunction. David is learning to manage his own business without family money as a safety net. My parents are volunteering at a local LGBTQ plus youth center, awkwardly but sincerely trying to understand the damage their attitudes caused. It's not perfect. There are still moments of tension, still conversations that don't go well, still work to be done, but there's progress. There's hope. Jordan and I are planning a small art show together, their first public exhibition in 5 years. My family will be there, all of them, and for the first time since that terrible dinner, we'll be together as a family, a different family than we were before, but maybe a better one. The truth is that 5 years of silence taught me something I never expected to learn. It taught me that family isn't just who you're born to, it's who you choose to stand with. It's who you're willing to fight for and who's willing to fight for you. I stayed silent for 5 years because I was hurt and angry and didn't know how to process the betrayal, but I'm not silent anymore. I found my voice and I'm using it too. Build something better than what we had before. The tiny mistake that gave me everything back wasn't the financial control I'd exercised or the revenge I'd taken. It was the moment I decided to stop being defined by that hurt and start being defined by what I wanted to create instead. Tonight, Jordan and I are having dinner at my apartment. It's nothing fancy, just pasta and wine, but it's ours. Tomorrow, we're driving to that small town where Jordan spent 5 years healing to pack up the last of their things and officially start this new chapter. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if Jordan and I will make it work long term. If my family will continue to grow and change, if the relationships we're rebuilding will last, but I know that silence isn't golden, love is, and love, real love, is worth fighting for, worth waiting for, worth rebuilding your entire life around. That's the story I wanted to tell you. Not just about revenge or justice or family drama, but about the choice we all have to make, the choice between staying stuck in our hurt or deciding to build something better, the choice between silence and speaking up for what matters. I chose love. I chose fighting for what matters. I chose to stop being silent, and that made all the difference.